Okay, so JD here. So today we're going to take a little bit of a pivot and talk about somebody that has come highly recommended from one of our clients. And this individual is a CEO that's 63 years young and he's still going. And a key principle of ours at Summa is 50 is a new 30, right? And so this individual, Frank Slootman, is a sterling example that age means nothing, right? Similar to Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's in his 50s, scaled that and to the enterprise it is today. Yes, In and Out is probably a little bit better than McDonald's, but it's still a pretty impressive story from where it started, right? So, Frank Slootman is kind of interesting to us because he wrote a few books, Tape Sucks and in 2011, and another book called Amp It Up most recently. And what is he? Like, so he's basically like the Joe Montana or the Tom Brady of CEOs. So he didn't come from a sterling background, no great pedigree, no Harvard, Yale, Princeton for him, but he found his way to the top numerous times, right? Through hustle and smarts, right? And basically finding a way to thrive in the super competitive enterprise software industry, not once, but multiple times, right? So with Data Domain, ServiceNow, and now Snowflake, right? And so what's interesting is, he wrote a recent book and has done some podcasts on his rise, right? On his ability to take subscale companies and grow them into multi-billion enterprise, billion-dollar enterprises, right? And so what's interesting is, we'll start with a quote from him. The number one quality to achieve success is a relentless pursuit of what you're doing. It is extremely hard to hold anyone back who is hell-bent on moving the dial and making things happen. People realize their commitments, efforts, and persistence are the magic. There are no silver bullets or shortcuts. If there's one piece of advice, start with the iron resolve to make things happen, right? So if it's your priorities with regard to health, wealth, and fitness, that same mindset can occur. If you read a few of his books, right? So his secret sauce is kind of raising your standards. So making sure that you have pretty high standards and that you meet them, you increase your velocity, so your execution, and then you narrow your focus. So you do less, but you do it deeper, right? And so it's really interesting. And he kind of summarizes some of these concepts up in an article he posted a few years back. And we can kind of share screen to kind of talk through further of this, what he means by that, right? So, when he talks about the rise of his prior company, ServiceNow, right? He talks about, a lot of his successes. And a lot of people are, hey, like asking him, hey, like, how did it happen, right? So he talks about amping up the pace and intensity, right, of an organization, similar to an organization in business, a team, okay, a team can improve, right? And he's really kind of core on leadership, right? Having the right leader and basically making sure that execution is on point, right? So what's interesting about his stories, they didn't use much capital in order to scale, okay, the exit or to scale the top line, right? It's kind of interesting, very capital efficient, right? What's also interesting is he kind of basically has a very combative experience, right? Um, for lack of a better term, and that mentality to persevere regardless of kind of the obstacles, right? So what's interesting was he kind of had a variance between the top performers and others. So focusing on A players and making sure that those are compensated better, right? He also has this concept of a driver versus a passenger. A driver is somebody that is in control, adds value, does things that matter, right? So a good analogy for us at Summa is basically, are you doing habits that move the needle? Are you waking up at the same time, going to bed at the same time? Are you hitting your 16 glasses of water, drink a gallon of water every day, right? Like these habits are kind of drivers of success that will get you to where you need to be. If it's increasing your basal metabolic rate, looking at reversing your biologic age, right? And taking NAD, things like that. Okay. Your habits can kind of map to what he's saying, right? What's also interesting is like the higher pace. Okay. So it's not an either or, it's an and higher velocity and higher standards and a narrow focus, right? So what he's really saying is basically, right? It's like, you know, how much faster are you going? How much higher your standards? These aren't mutually exclusive, right? And so it's like if you're trying to get successful, or trying to get healthy, trying to lose weight, like these can be right? And so it's basically kind of a mindset, so to speak, mentality, and obviously not a quick transformation, right? So, you know, talking about increasing velocity, driving up the tempo of organization, right? If you don't, you kind of void into the lethargy of life, right? Kind of interesting. And so when people see you energized, when you, for example, are working out, when you're waking up early, maybe your family members will notice, maybe your teammates on work will notice, right? You're kind of exuding energy and you're, exuding that pep in your step, right? So it's basically really interesting that he kind of goes through a few facets of how he kind of scaled his companies up multiple times. And the last thing I want to leave you with is narrowing the focus, right? And so, what is too much and what is too little focus, right? So he always has this concept of doing less, and going a mile deep, okay, and an inch wide, right? So like kind of focusing on less and just doing it very well, right? It's kind of interesting. So a good example, I guess, in your day to day, it's like, are you starting your day with like Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, or are you basically, focused on a top priority, getting the workout in, wake up same time, your top priority, top goal, right? And so, he has a very kind of repeatable playbook that he's done and a track record too of kind of training individuals, growing their roles, and executing, the entire, executing on a level so the entire organization kind of feels it, right? So he's a big fan of Vince Lombardi. He mentions him in his newest book. And, it's really interesting that right? He basically has had tremendous success, not once, not twice, but three times. Kind of reminds me of Brady a little bit, Tom Brady a little bit, when he left the Patriots and then he won the Super Bowl last year with the Bucks, right? People are obviously going to make fun of him maybe because he lost recently in the playoffs. But one thing I noticed about Tom, he took a lot of hits. I mean, and he stuck and in the game, he basically wasn't out until he wasn't out, right? So I think the moral of the story is really, age really doesn't mean anything, and when you want to achieve success, if it's, feeling like on point, if it's getting in 10% body fat, if it's, having better sleep, whatever it is in terms of your health and wellness, right? It doesn't have to be an or, it could be an and, right? And so one thing Frank Slootman has taught me, it's 63 years young, right? Impossible is nothing. So a little bit of a change of pace here, but I hope you enjoyed today.